All right, so let's continue on here, and we're going to look now into key concept 1.2, which is contact among Europeans, Native Americans, and Africans resulted in the Columbian Exchange, a very important vocabulary word, and it had significant social and cultural and political changes on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Um, so we took a look through different major societies. We looked through the Great Plains, Northeast, Northwest, Southwest, Southeast, and different parts of the United States is what we know today. And so right now what we're going to look at is we're going to take a little bit of more of an in-depth look into that key concept too, is why the Europeans decided to come to the Americas and what were some of the impacts of that, as well as we'll take a short, pretty quick look into the Spanish and some of their processes. So the big pushes at the time for European discovery of the Americas was mostly Asia, honestly. They were in many ways looking for a faster, quicker route to the profitable trade partner of Asia after the Crusades. As well as Marco Polo's journey, the Europeans had gotten a pretty insatiable desire for these Asian goods, whether they be silks or Asian spices. These are Asian even foods, vegetables. These are things that weren't available in Europe, and therefore they were the law of supply and demand. Of course, says that they are going to become extremely valuable in Europe and highly demanded. So the larger European nations started looking for a route from Europe to Asia. You know, of course, that the land route is not going to be the safest. It's going to be difficult, and there is no good water route, truly, except for a way around Africa, which was eventually discovered by Vasco da Gama. Portugal was the one who sent him. Vasco da Gama works his way around the point of Africa, and this was the main route that people used then to get to Asia. Spain, of course, also on the Iberian Peninsula, consistently looking to compete with Portugal, also needed a route to Asia, but they wanted to find something faster because clearly they couldn't just rely on Vasco da Gama's route, and Portugal was controlling that route. So when Christopher Columbus, who was actually Portuguese, came to the Spanish king and queen, they absolutely agreed for him to look for a western route to Asia. Christopher Columbus is going to, in many ways, make the world a much, much smaller place. No, Christopher Columbus was not the first person to land in the Americas. He was not really the first person to discover it. He is just the first person, the first documented European to discover it. At this point, we have proof, we have evidence that members from several different cultures had arrived on the Americas before Columbus. We know for sure that Leif Erikson and the Vikings had landed here. There's evidence that some Phoenicians in African culture, that several other Western culture, or European, African, and Asian cultures had made their way to the Americas before Columbus. He's just the first one that we have documented, so he gets a lot of the credit for it. He would go on to make 4 different trips. He was established as a governor at some point in Hispaniola, but was never truly successful with that. But he always holds on to his name and the title as the first true person to land in the Americas. His real legacy is his discovery of the Americas, but the important part is not who he is or what he does, but the chain of events that he sets off. The legacy, his actions in Hispaniola, in the Caribbean as a whole, is a destruction of thousands and thousands of Native American lives, whether it be purposeful, whether it be enslavement, whether it be through accidental transmission of smallpox and other diseases. His voyage also in many ways sets off a massive rush for goods coming from the Americas, a fight for gold from the Americas, an influx of conquistadors who would come in purely with the purpose of conquering the native societies, stealing their goods, raping their women. And so a lot of this is set off because of Columbus. And so just like that, the documents that we read in class, Sepulveda and Las Casas, we have to think about how they would react to this new societies. The people often fell into 2 camps, either that the natives deserved to be treated as equals, or that because they were inferior, that they deserved to be treated as children and enslaved, and that was what was good for them. So just within the first 30 years Within 30 years of Columbus arriving, two massive societies, the Aztecs and the Incas, completely crumble. The Aztecs and the Incas are conquered entirely, their goods destroyed, their goods taken away, their entire societies destroyed, burned to the ground, and removed because of Columbus's discovery. So this Columbian Exchange is going to be the biggie that the big effect and the I guess major point that you'll need to understand from key concept 1.2. So why is it the way it is? Why was it so easy for the Europeans to march through and completely destroy the native societies? Well, let's remember a lot of people believed that the native societies were just inferior. They were not as intelligent. But in reality, what it was, a lot of what we talked about in Key Concept 1.1 video was that specialization, the agricultural revolution. Why were native societies so different than the Europeans? There's two real reasons. One is that east-west versus north-south axis. If you notice, the Americas are on this large north and south axis, which is a massively different climates throughout the different portions. So they can't completely work together because what's working in Central America is not going to work in the northwestern portions of North America. It's not going to work throughout Canada, what we know as Canada today. So their trade is not going to be as effective. However, over here in the European and Asian climates, for the most part, they're on an east-west axis. You go throughout Europe, you go throughout Asia. These areas all can consistently trade back and forth and assume that their climates are going to be relatively similar, at least enough so much that they can grow the same crops, and technique will work across wider areas. So they have more capacity to work large-scale agriculture, which, as we've discussed, leads to specialization. Other help in that specialization is animal life. The cow, the oxen, the horse, and the camel are all native to that European and Asian area, which gives them military might, which gives them the capability to plow the land. In the Americas, the largest beast of burden they have is the alpaca. The alpaca can hold around 100 pounds at a time, so most people can't even sit on them. Alpaca are relatively useless except for their fur, so it's not something that they are going to be able to domesticate. Yes, we have the buffalo, but the buffalo is not a tamed animal. There's no domesticated animals that are working that would be able to help them in large-scale agriculture in the Americas. So these two things work together to lead European to specialize, develop larger society cultures, and it is no way a statement as to intelligence versus Native Americans. So Spain is essentially, because of Christopher Columbus, is the first true society to begin to establish their own culture in the Americas. They set up their own New World conquest. They conquer those two massive societies, the Aztecs and the Incas, which between them have almost 10 million people, almost all of whom die out, mostly because of disease. Those pack animals, the cow, the oxen, the horse, most diseases like smallpox, influenza, they come as a mutated version of something that is developed or come over from those pack animals. It wasn't something that the native societies had ever had any any exposure to. So the natives as a whole were not prepared for them and died out in the hundreds of thousands because of those, because they never truly had any exposure to them. Spain's empire, it really becomes massive throughout Central America, South America, all throughout parts of North America, throughout the southern parts of North America as well. They get extremely wealthy based off of that, and they establish much of their own culture. But within that culture, they also they begin to intermingle with the natives in some regard. So their colonial class system goes as such. The start for the Spanish, it's at the top, of course, is the pure Spanish ancestry, those that have come over from Spain, that have consistently married those that are also Spanish, the Peninsulars. They are pure bloods in many ways for you Harry Potter fans. As you work your way down through, you have the Creoles, which are Spanish and black mixed. At the next level of Spanish society, with the Mestizos, they are Spanish and Indian mix, and the Mulattoes, which are American and black mixture. And at the very bottom, you have black slaves and native Indians. So the Spanish do intermarry with the Native Americans. They don't look at the natives as so inferior that they can't be intermixed with. So there is a blending of cultures to an extent. There's definitely a blending of cultures with Spanish and native societies in there. And one of the things that Spanish consistently worked on, and one of the things that they worked the hardest to do, was convert the natives. The Spanish worked always through what they called the encomienda system. The encomienda system. I'll type that in. The encomienda system was a system that they developed mostly as a way to enslave the natives and to put them to work for them, but it was done through a type of mission. It was done through a mission system almost. It was a mission system that would enslave the Native Americans, but also teach them about Jesus, Christianity, Catholicism, and it would attempt to convert them while working them 10 to 15 hours a day. So as a whole, it was about enslaving the natives, but it was done in a way that was almost a church mission. So what do we really need to know? More than anything, what you need to know about Key Concept 1.2 is that these search for trade routes, for trade goods, this Christopher Columbus travels from Europe to Hispaniola, and their travels throughout this area, especially the Caribbean, is going to lead to one of the largest exchange of goods, and maybe the largest in the history of the world. This Columbian Exchange, goods between Europe, between Africa and North America, South America. It's not just pumpkins and squash and turkeys. It's an exchange of diseases. It's an exchange both ways of ideas as much as anything. So this Columbian Exchange is going to have massive implications across Europe, North America, as well as Africa, especially as we develop, as we're going to start to see with the colonies developments. These are going to continue to change the way that Native Americans live in the Americas, but it's also going to lead to a massive boom in population in Europe. Crops like potatoes, corn, tomatoes, peanuts, pumpkins, squash, those had never been seen in Europe before. When these new crops make their way to Europe, these are very easy to grow on large-scale agriculture. It's going to lead to further development of specialization, and in many ways, some of the larger industrial revolutions in Europe are going to be a direct effect of this Columbian Exchange. I guess maybe a secondary or tertiary effect more so than a direct effect. But these population booms are something that's going to happen, especially in Europe, because of what's going to come from North America. Those diseases going from North America to Europe are few and far between. I believe syphilis is the only documented disease that made its way from North America to Europe. Coming from Europe, however, you have smallpox, influenza, typhus, measles, malaria, the whooping cough, and the natives just were entirely not prepared for this, were not in any way immune to this, and because of that, they were almost entirely wiped out. So hopefully this Key Concept 1.2 is something that you understand a little bit better now. It wasn't something that we were able to really dive into, but it's something that we'll have a chance to go over more and more as we get into the colonies, as we get into, I guess, the triangle trade, and as we introduced African slaves as well. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you took good notes. You know that in class we are going to have our first assessment based off this video and the information you got here. I'll see you guys in class. Thanks.